Our second president, John Adams, a man of integrity, justice, and passion. John Adams, the eldest of three, was born October 30th, 1735 in North Precinct of Braintree, Massachusetts. As a child, Adams was an adventurous boy that loved the outdoors and frequently skipped school to fish and hunt near his father's estate, Peacefield. His father, John Adams Sr., was a deacon at the Congregational Church and made a living as a shoemaker and farmer, while his mother, Susanna Boylston, was known to have a quick temper. Both parents gave much freedom to their children, especially John. As John got older, his parents worried that he was wasting his talents. His father worked him hard on the farm fields the next day, hoping to convince stubborn John to look towards a better future. John agreed to focus on his studies if he was transferred to Joseph March, a more challenging school. He excelled in his studies and was able to enter Harvard in 1751 at the age of 15. John Adams graduated in 1755 with a Bachelor of Arts degree and then worked at a Latin school in Worcester to pay for his law school. He studied law with a prominent local lawyer, James Putnam, during his schoolmaster career. Adams left his teaching career behind and headed to Boston in 1758 to start his legal practices. At first, Adams was struggling with his career as a lawyer and didn't win a case until after 3 years of opening his office. Thereafter, his practice began to grow and flourish. He married Abigail Smith on October 25, 1764, who would help him throughout his political career. By 1770, Adams was a very successful lawyer with the most caseload of any attorney in Boston, and was chosen to defend the British soldiers who took part in the Boston Massacre of March 1770. He succeeded to prove the soldiers innocent and began to write extensively for newspapers about social, legal, and political issues. When the colonial protests started about Parliament in Britain, Adams was first reluctant and questioned the rebellion for his family and legal practices and did not trust the leaders of the rebels, including his cousin, Samuel Adams. Yet he still proceeded to assist the movement by writing anonymous newspaper essays and helped stir up propaganda. As Britain continued to tax and strip the colonies from their rights, Adams grew to openly support the movement. Abigail and John Adams were one of the most loyal couples in the history of the U.S. As Adams was away for long periods of time due to political issues, Abigail raised 5 children by herself. She looked upon her suffering as a patriotic sacrifice. Adams and Abigail stood out from other marriages at the time due to their respect for each other. Adams viewed and spoke to his wife as an equal and asked for her opinion and advice through their letters. Abigail aided Adams with her wise words during the Revolution, and he willingly took the advice.
Before becoming president, John Adams was a key role in the Revolutionary War. His expertise and knowledge were really important to the Patriots. Before the Revolutionary War, tension between the British soldiers stationed in the colonies and the Americans were high. The Boston Massacre was conceived from the tension. Soldiers of the 14th and 29th Regiment were put on trial for the death of 5 writing Americans. Those include Crispus Attucks, Samuel Gray, James Caldwell, Samuel Maverick, and Patrick Carr. Adams, with the obsession for justice, represented the falsely accused soldiers. Only 2 of the 9 British soldiers were charged with manslaughter, and the rest were found not guilty. John Adams took part in both the First and Second Continental Congress. In the First Continental Congress, John Adams represented Massachusetts and helped Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin write a very famous document called the Declaration of Independence. In the Second Continental Congress, John Adams represented Massachusetts and wrote the whole Massachusetts Constitution. John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, Thomas Jefferson, and Henry Lawrence wrote the Treaty of Paris. The document ended the Revolutionary War, set borders, and recognize America as a free and independent country. The document was approved by Congress on January 14, 1784, and the British government, known as Parliament, approved the Treaty of Paris on April 9, 1784. After the Revolutionary War, Adams served 2 terms as vice president under George Washington. He served from 1797 to 1801. Before the 12th Amendment, the president was elected when they received the highest amount of electoral votes, and the vice president was elected when they received the second highest electoral votes. Adams hated the position as vice president. He thought he was too smart and qualified for the job.
John Adams wanted to keep peace and stay neutral between France and Britain, just as George Washington had. But it was very difficult to do so with France. France seized American merchant ships and hired American privateers because of the United States peace treaty, Jay's Treaty, with Britain. To stay neutral with France, Adams sent a committee of 3 diplomats to Paris to negotiate a peace treaty with French Minister Charles Talleyrand. Instead, the minister sent 3 secret agents to tell the American diplomats that they would have to pay a bribe of $250,000 and a loan of $2 million to meet him. This act outraged Congress and the people of America, and they cried for war to defend America's name. Adams responded to the XYZ affair by asking Congress for help. He wanted to expand the Navy, improve coastal defenses, and organize the Marine Corps, and create a peacetime army. Meanwhile, there was an undeclared war, the quasi-war crisis, happening between America and France. After years, Adams finally negotiated a treaty with Napoleon, French leader, called the Treaty of Mortefontaine in 1799. This ended the United States alliance with France and stopped their naval battles, and making it one of Adams' proudest moments. In 1798, the Alien and Sedition Acts were signed by John Adams. It consisted of 4 laws passed by a Federalist-controlled Congress. The Alien Acts made it more difficult to earn citizenship, allowed the president to deport, arrest, or jail immigrants. The Sedition Acts prohibited any false criticizing or opposing writing a crime, though many people argued that the Alien Sedition Acts objected to First Amendment rights like free speech and press. The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions of 1798 were a response to the Alien and Sedition Acts from Jefferson and Madison. They opposed it since it was against their party and the laws were an abuse of power. The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions protested against how they were limited rights and were constitutional. This was the first time advocates of states' rights tried to stop or nullify the central government's actions. Though the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions did not have an authority, the Alien Sedition Act expired in 1800 through 1801. John Adams he also set many precedents in the making as well. For one, he was the first president to reside in the White House. He was also the very first vice president in the United States to George Washington, who was the first president of America. Adams was the first president to receive the oath of office from Chief Justice of America's Supreme Court. Meanwhile, when the XYZ affair was recent, Adams created the Navy and made them stronger by creating the Marine Corps and giving guidance, directions, and force to the new team. Though John Adams was sometimes hot-headed and didn't listen to his own political party, he did help shape our world today. In John Adams' cabinet, there was the First Lady, Abigail Adams, Vice President Thomas Jefferson, and the Secretary of State, John Marshall, and Timothy Pickering, etc.
John Adams' eldest son, John Quincy Adams, would follow his father's footsteps and win in the election of 1824. Before his presidency, John Quincy Adams was Monroe's Secretary of State and the 6th President of the United States. As Secretary of State, he was a diplomat who made great strides in America's foreign policy, gaining freedom on the seas and writing the famous Monroe Doctrine, ending European settlements in the Western Hemisphere. Unfortunately, he was not a remarkably popular or successful president, but after his presidency, he became a congressman who fought against slavery. 2 years after his victory in the 1824 election, his father died. After living to the ripe old age of 90, John Adams died on July 4th, 1826 in Quincy, Massachusetts at his home, Peacefield. It is believed that his end was due to his old age as well as heart failure. Coincidentally, that day was the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. As Americans celebrated the 4th of July, he lay in his deathbed, uttering his final words, "Thomas Jefferson still survives." Ironically, though, his good friend and rival had died just hours earlier. Adams' original gravesite was at Hancock Cemetery, where his eldest son would be buried as well. Today, he rests in the United First Parish Church across the road from his original gravesite. To conclude, John Adams will be remembered as a politician of great reason and passion. He led firmly yet kept the rights and dignity of others in mind. He stood by his beliefs in the face of many who opposed him. Among his accomplishments were the launch of the U.S. Navy and a foreign policy that benefited the country as a whole while still remaining neutral in the war between Britain and France. Most importantly, he was able to sign a peace treaty with France, a feat he wished to be remembered for after his death. If it weren't for Adams' work towards peace, the country would have fallen into a war it was not prepared for and would have been ripped apart between the division of the Federalists and Democratic Republican ideas. Although many Americans wanted to go to war and were against the treaty, John Adams will be remembered for securing the unity he knew was so vital to the country in its young, vulnerable condition.
An open letter to the fat, arrogant, anti-charismatic, national embarrassment known as President John Adams. The man's irrational, he claims that I'm in league with Britain in some vast international intrigue. Please, you wouldn't know what I'm doing, you're always going berserk, but you never show up to work. Give my regards to Abigail next time you write about my lack of moral compass. At least I do my job up in this rumpus. The line is behind me, I crossed it again. Well, the president lost it again. Oh, such a rough life, better run to your wife, you're the bosses in Boston again. Let me ask you a question, who sits at your desk when you're in Massachusetts? They were calling you a d- back in 76, and you haven't done anything new since. You nuisance with no sense, you'll die of irrelevance. Go ahead, you can call me the devil, you spot on my level, you spot on malevolence. Say hi to the Jeffersons and the spies all around me, maybe they can confirm. I don't care if I kill my career with this letter, confining you to one term, you fat mother.
And his name is John
Adams.